The robotic voice has let us know it has begun. Welcome. My name is Panthea Batandust, pronouns she, her. I am the program associate at PACT, and I am calling you from my place of residence, which is the unceded, stolen ancestral territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations, colonially known as Vancouver, British Columbia. I will start off by giving a very brief overview of what the day is going to look like. So Brad Lepp, the executive director of PACT, is going to give us some remarks. And then Lara Caswell, who is a board member at PACT and also the chair of the Environmental Stewardship Committee, will talk about the committee, the start of the Green Award, and then she is going to present the award. And then we will go directly into our two presentations, and then from there we will move on to a Q&A session. Without further ado, I will hand things over to Brad. If you folks have questions, please use the chat function or do the raise hand thing, and we will call on you. Thank you so much, Brad.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Panthea. I am joining you from Toronto, Treaty 13 territory. Treaty so bad they've had to renegotiate it 3 times and still awful. Territory covered by Dish with One Spoon wampum territory. Of course, in the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat, and the Anishinaabeg, including the Mississaugas of the Credit. We're a bit of a smaller group today, but of course, as we're reminded that we should never doubt that a small group of, and you know the rest of this, thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world because it is the only thing that ever has. And so as I shared with Sunny and Sadie, we wanted to take this moment to at least make some space for today and acknowledge it. And we're going to continue to think about and find ways to lift up and center this kind of work. And PACT is a learning organization. And so, you know, we're still discovering this thread and this field and how we operate in it. And so if anyone on this call, I see a lot of familiar names and champions in this space, we always invite feedback and ideas and spaces where you'd like to see PACT kind of getting involved. But when I joined PACT about 6 months ago now, I was really excited to hear about the Environmental Stewardship Committee and how the organization has named this as a national priority. And of course, in the midst of so many priorities, in the midst of, I saw it called pan crisis, global, economic, employment, social, generational. And it's tricky to know where to hold space because it does all of this weighs on us in different ways and different elements of our communities. But what strikes me, and I know all of you have helped me realize this, is that, you know, of course, eco-justice, climate justice is the silver bullet, that you can't have economic justice without climate justice. You can't have racial justice without climate justice. You can't have Indigenous reconciliation without climate justice. And of course, the opposite is also true. So in this economic and social climate, you know, we've seen a rise in anxiety and isolation, despair and division. And, you know, to be blunt, it's hard out there for our members, for theaters, for cultural organizations, for our audiences, for our artists, and for our organizations. And it would be easier, not easy, but easier to contract. It would be easier to lean towards small c conservatism. It would be easier to say yes, but not right now. And what we've seen as a sector is a statement that despite these hard times, we're not willing to backslide, that we're not willing to go back to the way things used to be, that we will innovate rather than relapse. And I take a lot of solace in that. I was in a meeting today, earlier today, and the question was raised, why is it that the cultural sector is expected to carry this burden? You know, why are arts organizations asked to approach our work through a sustainability lens? Do environmental organizations view their work through a cultural arts lens? Why do arts organizations require to, do all their work through a economic business case or through a social equity lens? Do businesses approach their work through a cultural lens? And it seems to me that it's because we are the front lines, that theaters, I would say more than any other discipline, and I recognize this is not limited to theaters, but we're navigating these issues as a community with our communities, for our communities. We're Canada's storytellers, and the fight against climate change desperately needs a new narrative. And I think that's where we come in. And yes to improving our practices, yes to sharing knowledge and information dissemination, yes, but really, in that space, inspiration, storytelling, of asking questions, of what ifs, of using our creative energies to imagine a compelling, better future. And I think that's where we can play the biggest impact, the biggest role. And so I know there's urgency to this work, but there's great opportunities here and they exist. And that's where, I think today comes from. And I'm really excited to recognize this work and find new ways to lift it up and to celebrate it and to share it with our sector and beyond. So thank you for joining us today. It's one more step on a long road, but it's an exciting one, and we want to take moments to celebrate them as we go. So thank you very much.
I think it's. Hi there, sorry. My name is Laura Caswell, she, her. I'm in Mi'kma'ki, in Chibuktuk, which means Great Harbor in Halifax, Nova Scotia, land of the Mi'kmaq. So grateful for those wise words, Brad. Thank you so much. I am the chair or the head of the Environmental Stewardship Committee. This is my second year in this position, and it's been a really interesting time to have many discussions, brainstorms, strategies. We have a team of approximately 25 people who meet about 6 times a year and share resources and emails, and are working on lots of different strategies to share with our membership. And one of the biggest achievements so far has been the Green Awards. This is open to members of PACT and non-members. And we're looking to recognize those who are creating projects surrounding climate action, environmental stewardship, focused on an intersection of the arts and environmentalism. And the first winner, the inaugural winner, was last year in 2023 with Vancouver's The Only Animal Theatre Society, and recognizing their work with the Artist Brigade. There's lots of amazing information out there if you want to look into that amazing project. We have a jury that worked hard to review all of our applications this year. And I'm going to tell you about the winner in just a moment. As Brad sort of recognized, that the Green ESC, the Environmental Stewardship Committee, is really working right now on amplifying and celebrating what is being done in our theater communities with theater artists and climate action. So this Green Award is one of those ways. I'm just going to plug right now, we're also going to be launching a little green light in some of our emails, which will just be not an award, just a recognize a green spotlight on initiatives, just to remind people what is happening and what they can do in their own organization. So keep an eye out for that. But that's not why we're here. We are here to give award recognition to an amazing project. I was so excited to read about this one. So here it is, drum roll in your own little world. The award for this year's Green Award is Sunny Drake Productions' work, Climate Change and Other Small Talk. I will let them present a more in-depth presentation. Yes, applause, 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 emoticons. I'll just briefly outline that this was a theatrical podcast produced in association with Why Not Theatre, engaging with other theaters. I think it was 9 companies across Canada and around the world, highlighting the climate crisis from fictional and humorous angle, storytelling, all of our favorite. Each partner company hosted listening parties in their respective locations with community events and gatherings, debates, intimate conversations, conversations with Indigenous playwrights. And listeners around the world can still listen to this. So hopefully Sunny will share that information and to utilize this as discussion guides to host their own listening parties and encouraging these conversations to continue. So in a moment, we'll hear from Sunny about that. But we will also announce today our runner-up. And our runner-up for this year's award is the SKAMpede. Great name, SKAMpede, a minimal waste festival based out of Victoria in the Sustainable Fox and Theatre SKAM, and their festival minimal waste. So again, applause, applause, applause. I also loved reading this whole application, some amazing photos and quotes and things to accompany their submission. Their most recent festival observed more than 98% festival waste diverted from landfill. And through that project, they also integrated a minimal waste performer guide, which could be used as a way for other people to look at how they could create this kind of action in their own work and in their own festivals and in their own lives. So I think that's really amazing to also use these opportunities for resources for other people. So with that, I will pass it on to our winner, Sunny Drake, to tell us more. So thank you so much and congratulations to everyone.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Laura and Brad and Panthea, for all of your introductions. And just a huge thanks to PACT. Before everyone else got on, Sadie and Panthea and I were talking about just how impactful, like, it is, particularly in terms of kind of setting a new metric for what is success, and being able to kind of recognize these things really helps us then to kind of redefine what a successful theatre production is. So firstly, just to say a huge thank you for also wading through and no doubt incredible applications, because I know there's some really amazing stuff going on with other projects too. But yeah, to give you I'm going to share my screen to show you some slides. To talk a little bit about this project. Okay, so that's now, okay, can everyone see that okay now? Great. So this project, Climate Change and Other Small Talk, came out of, I was busy doom scrolling on my phone and kind of getting increasingly despairing, and went, you know what, I've actually got to start really making, my commitment is now for the rest of my career, I will be making climate related works amongst other things. And so I took myself off to, with Canada Council funding, I went on this incredible artist residency in the Arctic on that ship with 30 artists and scientists up in the Svalbard Islands, so way north of Scandinavia, just 10 degrees away from the actual North Pole. And on the boat, I mean, it was it's an incredible part of the world. And I started just frantically writing a whole bunch of short plays inspired by the countryside and these giant glaciers, and things like finding this washed up TV screen on this remote beach in the middle of the Arctic, and then one day getting stuck in pack ice and visiting an abandoned Russian coal mining village. So all of these like incredible sort of inspiration for writing climate themed works. But my idea changed entirely the day that we arrived in New Allisand, which is the world's northernmost climate and weather research station. And there we met these scientists who are doing this really important work in studying the local conditions. So they collect all of this data, and it's that local data which gives us such an important picture about what's going on in their region. But then equally importantly, they combine their data together with hundreds of other weather stations around the world. And it's that interplay and between the very local and the global that is really important in our understanding of climate change. And I started noticing also that's the same within the world of activism. We can't have this one size fits all approach. Like, climate solutions have to be very locally based and tailored, but at the same time, we also can't have a collection of local communities off doing their own thing without some form of global collaboration and communication. So I kind of went then, okay, what would be the theatrical equivalent of this, exploring this local versus global. And so when, okay, instead of writing my own full-length play or even my own series of short plays, instead I went, okay, I reached out to, well, for starters, enrolled Why Not Theatre as an associate producer, and then reached out to 9 other companies around the world and went, hey, you want to collaborate on this thing? And each of these companies created a short audio drama episode. So in Vancouver, we had Electric, and then Downstage in Calgary, Soul Pepper in Toronto, Zupper in Halifax. We had Thespian Muse in Nigeria, Cocodrillo Triste in Chile, Chord and Arts in Mauritius, QTP in India, and Darwin Community Arts in Australia. And each team, then we had local director, local playwright, local actors, local sound designers, etc. And I gave like a kind of a time limit, and I also gave a sort of stylistic parameters to each team and went, okay, dig into local climate themes, but it has to be somewhere in the realm of satire, absurdity, or using some form of humor and comedy, because I just went, so many of us are despairing, myself included. So I really wanted an offering for audiences that sort of got in sideways and was going to be something that after a long day of work, people would actually look forward to listening and engage with really important themes, but in an entertaining way. And also a very core kind of principle in the selection of these playwrights and teams was climate justice. So really kind of looking at, engaging playwrights and communities who are most impacted by climate change. And then that all got brought together into this global podcast, which is available on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify. We also have a website interface, which you can listen directly from the website. And the website has calls to action and lots of information and guides on how to host your own listening party, and all of the rest. And I'll just stop my screen share here for a moment. And yeah, so I mean, working with so in total, it was around 100 artists from around the world. So these 9 companies, 100 artists. It was in like an incredibly enriching experience. It was also epic and logistically bananas, and hats off to my core team of producers who managed the time zones and, all of the different moving pieces. And it was really interesting to see what was both kind of like the logistical challenges, etc., also really fed into such an incredibly expanded audience for the work. Like, we were quite blown away and very surprised that, I mean, at the outset, we'd gotten advice from, this was the first ever podcast that I'd ever created. So we got advice, and people were sort of like, look, the podcast market is incredibly saturated. But I think due to kind of having this level of different partnerships, but also to having such a wide range of creators, that then so many different audiences could go, see themselves kind of reflected in the work, and it really brought in a lot of different audiences. And so, that meant that we managed to make them the top 10 in Apple Podcasts in quite a lot of different countries, in all of the countries bar one that we had partners in, but also, we had listeners just all across the world in these random other places. And then once you kind of get ranked up in the Apple Podcast, then it kind of, also takes on a little bit of a life of its own. So I'm just keeping an eye on time here. So folks also asked me to talk about some of the logistics, like funding. So this was funded. We got a giant grant from the Canada Council Digital Now. We also got a long-term project grant from the Toronto Arts Council. So that gave us 3 years worth of funding, as well as some provincial funding. And then each of the 9 partners brought some form of either in-kind support, or some brought some extra cash support. And then, so for example, Darwin Community Arts is a similar funding environment to Canada, who can get some funding, also put some money into the central project, which we then just sent straight back out to some of the majority world countries, like the Nigerian company, who are operating in an extremely underfunded context. So just kind of distributed the resources around like that. And one of the other big learnings for the project was we hired an impact producer. So many of you would know that's a position more common in the documentary film world. And we kind of went, let's experiment with what would it mean to, like, we wanted to actually kind of have somebody looking at what's the art, and how can we actually channel audiences who are engaging through to meaningful action. So our impact producer kind of had very specific calls to action for each of the episodes, and an impact campaign. And that was also one of the challenges of the project, and learnings for me too, is I really learned that actually an impact campaign attached more strongly to a local area and a local something is a lot easier to do. It's a lot more challenging to do a global impact campaign, because like we discussed before, and in the premise of the project, that the solutions need to be so locally based. So that was certainly something that we had to kind of figure out along the way, was how to run both a global campaign, but also support our partners to run kind of local impact campaigns too. And the last thing I'll say, I'm just looking at time. Do I have time left in my? Yes, very briefly, I'll just say that for me, this is then I've started to see this as part of actually a trilogy. So this is part one, and part two and part three are going to be very formally different. So part one was this theatrical podcast. Part two is going to be a live, a full length play, but also an audience driven experience. So two parts in of itself. And whereas part one was really about this connection between the global and the local, part two, we're drilling down and we're going to the connection between the individual and community. And whereas part one was inspired by climate science, part two is inspired by climate psychology. So I'm going to be working with some international climate psychology experts as collaborators on the piece. And then part three will kind of zoom way out to look at the relationship between planet and universe, and in collaboration with climate spiritual leaders. So we're going from kind of science to psychology to spiritual and local global down to individual community, and then way out to planet and universe. And so I'm just the second piece. The second segment is called Way More Fun Than Dying in the Apocalypse. And I'm just in the kind of, I'm incubating the idea at the moment and about to start looking for partners. So if anybody knows of companies who might be interested to talk about, I will be definitely looking for partners on that. But yeah, now to hand back, and I can't wait to hear some more about Sadie's project as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was amazing. Thank you for sharing. I hope maybe someone could put that website into the chat in case someone needs to copy it, but congrats again. Amazing work. I'll pass it now to Sadie to talk about the SKAMpede and Minimal Waste Festival. Thank you so much.
Hello, my name is Sadie. My pronouns are they, them, and she, her. And I want to echo everything that Sunny said. It's been so nice to connect even just before we started and to talk about some of these values. And I'm just a little in awe from how amazing Sunny's project is. And I'm so excited to see the next iterations of it. I love that progression from one step to the other. So I'm just going to share my screen here. And I got to click the three buttons. And are we seeing a full screen presentation? Yes, excellent. Okay, so I'm presenting on behalf of both Theater SKAM and the Sustainable Fox. I am the founder, leader, owner of the Sustainable Fox, which is a small waste reduction strategies business here on Lekwungen territories in Victoria. And we are presenting for the SKAMpede Festival, which we run as a minimal waste festival. And So SKAMpede, just as the preface, is an outdoor, decentralized performing arts festival, which takes place on the unceded territory of Lekwungen-speaking peoples. It's a festival where people are encouraged to ride their bikes or walk or whatever kind of commuting is feasible for them to see several shows along an outdoor tour route, rather, it's more accurate. So the background, we have this lovely photo of me and Kate Wallace, and that's how we initially started working together as the Sustainable Fox and Theater SKAM. So this past summer marked our 5th year of collaboration to make the SKAMpede Festival a minimal waste festival. And it all started with a serendipitous reach out. And 5 years later, we are continuing to push the boundaries of what better event practices can look like. And so to contextualize what this work actually looks like, the Sustainable Fox does all of the waste management, planning, sorting, and diversion, and then also data tracking, which is what allows us to then come and share this information in this kind of a way. So after 5 years of data collection, we can say that we have never thrown more than 5% of the festival waste in the garbage. And that includes from setup through to the end of strike. So we're not cutting it close on either side there, everything. The waste management is the last thing packed up at the end of every festival. And that in 2023, approximately 97% of festival waste, we'll look at the 98 versus 97 in just a moment here. 97% of festival waste was diverted from the landfill. So that means only 3% going into landfill. And this is what that can look like. So this is a brief version of sharing the information. If anyone's interested in the full spreadsheet breakdown, get in touch and we can talk about what that looks like. So on the left, this shows by volume what we've diverted from landfill, and on the right by weight. So what I'll just draw our attention to is that the sliver at the top, the kind of gray sliver, is the amount of festival produced landfill waste. And that's only 1.6% for volume and 1.32% by weight. And the reason that's different from the 95.9 we're seeing at the top and the 97 is because we also facilitated a litter pick this year. And so we're not counting that as festival produced waste, but it is contribute to ultimately what was sent to landfill. We're hoping this year to expand to possibly litter pick more waste than we produce in the whole festival. We'll see how that goes and update you. So this is a simplistic pie chart. A few other interesting stats is that over the 5 years we've been working together, we've diverted upwards of 2,000 liters of waste away from landfill, and that in total, all of the garbage we've produced in the last 5 years would fit in one standard black garbage bag. So that's a couple fun ways of thinking about the data. What we're saying about storytellers and theater practitioners and how we tell the story, I think, is really important to how we do this work. So in that vein, what are some of the keys to the success? Minimal waste is a big part of it, which means that we aim to reduce how much waste we create in the first place, and then we plan ahead so that most of that waste we do produce can be composted or recycled. These diversion rates that you're seeing would not be possible without that level of pre-planning. So here are some tips to start your own minimal waste journey that you can apply directly to any event or even your household if you're looking to reduce your waste. And I'll say that the first two of these came directly from the SKAM team when I was working with them to figure out what is the most useful content to share here with you folks. So the first is that sustainability is easier to implement as a forethought. So if you're planning from the beginning, you will create less waste. And related is that a well-integrated team member / producer who is dedicated to the sustainability is key to ensuring that the environmental considerations have a voice throughout the planning process. If you don't have someone sitting at the table who is responsible for that work, it will not happen. The next is to be intentional with your language. As I said, we choose minimal waste, and we know exactly what that means. And the last one, don't hand out garbage. You're going to end up with it anyway. People are going to bring stuff from outside of whatever event you're producing, but you can start by not handing any out if possible. And so just to round us off here, I just want to share a little bit more about why do we choose minimal waste as the term. You may have heard more commonly zero waste. We choose not to use that term, and these are the most important reasons why. So one is that minimal waste is a goal you can continue to improve at, and you can invite others to participate in. The second is that it acknowledges that sometimes there's going to be some waste, and then it gives us a framework to actually talk about that and fix that problem and to make reductions as opposed to absolutes. The third is that it removes judgment for health or accessibility related waste, which we've seen be an issue where accessibility and sustainability are butting heads. And we want to eliminate that as much as possible out of respect for, as we said, I really appreciated the pan crisis. I hadn't heard that before, that term, and that sustainability is something of a silver bullet. And that if we do it mindfully, it should incorporate all of these other social justice and awareness issues that we're bringing to the table. And the last is that it's a more accurate and active goal than zero waste. And it can be an unlocking of blockers for some folks to switch the mindset of how we're thinking about it. Again, how we tell the story. And so just to conclude, I want to say that if that term resonates with you and you want to try it out at your events, please feel free to make as much use of it as it has for you. Thanks so much. I'm sorry I went about a minute over. And I will stop sharing.
Thank you so much both for your wonderful presentations and your wonderful work. I really, it's so inspirational, and I think all of these resources that you've also created will go a long way from beyond just your own projects. But before I pass it on to this person, I also do have to shout out to Panthea for all the work that Panthea does for the Green Award. Panthea works very, very hard to make this possible and would not be a thing without her. So she is now going to facilitate our Q&A, but thank you very much for all your work, and thank you everyone for being here today.
That was very kind, Laura. Thank you. Wonderful presentation, Sunny and Sadie. That was so engaging. I'm feeling very jazzed. Before I open it to the floor, I actually have just one question. Sadie, would you mind clarifying the statement, "Don't hand out garbage"? I'm very curious about that.
Yes, I would love to. So as we said, so the pre-planning is really important. And one of the things that we are very conscious of when we plan the SKAMpede Festival is anything that we hand out, whether it's part of concession or ticketing or just anywhere that stuff leaves our hands and goes into somebody else's hand. Anything you hand out should have a receptacle at your event that diverts it from landfill is the ideal. So if you're handing out things that must go in the garbage, you are going to end up with garbage, and you must provide that receptacle, that waste stream, basically. Not handing out garbage allows us to hide most of the garbage cans, which is how another one of the ways that we end up with this diversion rate is that if you want to use the garbage, you have to get past me or past my assistant. And normally there's a better option. And so there's that education process that kind of happens naturally in situ.
That's amazing. Thank you for clarifying. That's really cool. I also am deeply appreciative by how incredibly impactful both of these projects are, and how they are each of them in communication and in connection with others, but on different scales. And it's kind of it's modeling how you can do a more global active work as well as a more communal active work, instead of everyone constantly reinventing the wheel in their own little bubbles over and over again. I really appreciate that. Folks who are attending, do you have any questions, comments for our lovely presenters? If you don't want to come on camera, you can also put it on the chat. Lara.
I will do one on behalf of some of our ESC members. I think something that comes up in conversation is groups being afraid to share what they are doing and in fear of being told they're not doing enough. So I wondered if you have any advice for that mindset and how we can move forward and shift our psychology on that, perhaps. Thank you. That's for either of you.
You go,
No
Sadie.
answer.
I want to let Sunny go first.
Oh, you go, Sadie. I feel like
Okay.
you'd have really useful things to say about that.
Yeah, I think that yeah, I do have some strong feelings on this. I think that I have often struggled with a bit of imposter syndrome about this work and the scale that we're doing it at. And our honest answer is that next step is scaling upward for us and figuring out how to achieve this with like larger attendance events. But I think part of what contributes to our collective climate anxiety is the sense that there isn't anything happening around us, and that we're not able to see the tangible change. And I think that it can be so powerful, even in an incremental way, to see someone doing something different, to see a system look different than we expect, and to feel like it's made a shift for the better. And I think that the value of sharing our incremental wins is way greater than we give it credit for. I think at the community level in particular. And the other half of that is that if we do not share what we're working on, even in that incremental sense, then we don't get the opportunity to collaborate as quickly or effectively, because other people can't see, hey, you're doing that and I want to help make it bigger, and it starts by being a small idea. And it does take work and collaboration and support to get to a place where you're doing something large that you want to yell from rooftops about. Yeah, that's my instinct on that.
Thanks, Sadie. Yeah, it's a great question, Laura, and something I think a lot of us struggle with. And I mean, my answer to kind of add to what Sadie said, but in a quite a different direction, is like I think that well, like sometimes I feel like okay, I'll take an example from actually a project that just opened of mine called Childish in Vancouver, that's playing in Vancouver at the moment. And I was talking with kids about the climate crisis. So it's a verbatim theatre piece where I interviewed 41 kids about life and love and mental health and the climate and unicorns and anything they wanted to talk about. And then I have adult actors speak their exact words to kind of tip, see if that changes our listening. And when kids were talking about the climate crisis, like they were really aware of, I was actually surprised at how much kids knew about a lot of the big things going on in the world. But whereas with the same things that they were saying, I can tend to kind of get this crushing, oh, look, we're doomed. What happened in the interviews was in the middle of it, they're talking, literally the kids are saying, well, we should build, maybe we're going to have to start building spaceships to go to Mars. Well, it takes 10 years to build a spaceship, but wait a minute, we might not have 10 years left on Earth. So kids are saying pretty like doom and gloom things. And then in the middle, they literally stop and one kid looks up and goes, unicorn, where are you? Tell us what the future's like. And then they start having a conversation with the unicorn, and it turns out the unicorn doesn't actually know what the future is like. The unicorn, it turns out, doesn't have the ability of time travel. But the result of that conversation was the unicorn communicated that the unicorn is in fact hopeful. And I just thought, like, taking a kind of like a kid approach, which is kids are in a constant state of learning. And a constant state of learning means that they are at any moment of the day aware that their whole world may be turned upside down. They may learn how to tie their shoelaces, or they may learn, how a seedling grows. So their knowledge is constantly shifting throughout the day, and that leaves an openness to the fact that they don't know everything about the universe. And sometimes I feel like I myself, as an adult, get overconfident in, what we think is going to happen in the future. And of course, we need to take the warnings of scientists very, very seriously. It's not about denial of the prediction, but in fact, there's so much that we don't know. I recently had brunch with randomly sat next to a NASA physicist, and he was like, okay, great brunch game. Ask me any question about the universe. And my partner said, oh, how did time begin? And he went, oh, yeah, no one really knows that. So it's like there's so much that we don't know. There is and Rebecca Solnit's essay on hope is a really great trajectory of just leaning into one foot in front of the other. We don't know what's going to happen. Therefore, there is actually no amount of action that is too small to take. because we don't know what that, what that kind of combination of actions is going to yield, and including that we may in fact find out that there is another dimension and there are hopeful unicorns and they're going to be the key to everything. But we're never going to get to that dimension if we don't one foot in front of the other.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Thank you both. Brad, I saw you had a hand up, but just before we go to that, Sunny, could you repeat the name of the author of the essay on hope? I would love to look that up and pop it in the chat.
Rebecca Solnit. I'll type it into the chat here.
Oh, amazing.
I can't remember the name of the essay, but if you Google Rebecca Solnit essay about hope, she really traces through the kind of seeds of what we think of as like, oh, this win, this kind of activism win came from here. She's like, actually, that activism win came from way back there, and the people way back there never got to see it. But it's part of kind of like, all of the seeds of what got us somewhere. Yeah. Oh, someone amazing, Josh. You're so much better on the. Yeah, great.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Josh. Wonderful. Thank you. Brad.
Sorry, clicking on the links and popping up the windows. And no, I took my hand down because my questions seem so small in light of the wisdom that both of you just shared with us, and I really appreciated that. A deep appreciation. One, Sadie, I love your advice and guidance there. The importance of naming a person to prioritize it. That's not side of desk, but just the power of name and title that gives authority and gives power and empowering to that person to play an integral role in that. So I appreciate that. Also, being a data nerd gives opportunity, that invitation to celebrate. Seeing that wheel gets way more, enters is an invitation as opposed to, as you say, zero is a closed, minimal is an invitation. And I'm just receiving that as a really exciting prompt. So thank you for both those pieces. And waste is an exciting part of that conversation. I wonder if you have any comments around energy as part of that piece as well. And then Sunny, so jazzed about all of the unicorns and the hope and the pieces, and blown away by this idea of constant upheaval and us entering into that childlike space. And this is my small question, which was, how did you find your international partners and kind of creating a space for very different approaches to the climate crisis, recognizing that our Western experience is rooted in some of that privilege piece. So anyway, thank you.
Maybe I'll go first in order. Thank you for that feedback. I love seeing someone in the chats already saying they've just opened up their strategic plan document to add minimal waste. Love this. Please shout it from the rooftops. Yeah, and I just want to further corroborate what you're saying there. Something that has always really struck me about the zero waste framing, which I want to also say has really powerful traction right now, and I think is important, and I don't want to minimize that. But has always, to me, the other way I phrase this is that zero is a pass-fail goal. As soon as any waste is created, you've lost at zero waste. And the reality, jumping right into the second half of the question, and energy consumption, is that recycling and compost are waste. Anything you're interacting with, there's waste involved in the process before it reaches you. And so that's one of the things that it can be a really disheartening realization for folks that even if they didn't put anything in the garbage all day, they're not technically zero waste. And so it's one of the reasons why we've shifted to minimal, and also for the access reasons. When it comes to energy consumption, I am not a carbon expert. I teach through an intersectional lens, and so really try to bring all of the different factors of what it means to think sustainably together. And one of the things we think about in that case is energy consumption. And so I do consultation on more or less impactful choices and share information about how to know how to make those choices, but we're not doing any work specifically around the carbon impact But I will say that last year we one-upped ourselves. Logan of Theater SKAM challenged me to see if we could cut out the vehicle trips it took to make the waste management happen. And so I biked over 100 kilometers with my bike trailer last year, making the waste management happen. And we did one vehicle trip to take stuff away at the end. So that was kind of an extra little bonus for us that isn't really represented in the data anywhere. But there's a lot of ways we can consider our carbon and energy impact. Some of them are common sense things. Some of them have to do with what kinds of purchasing we make. But ultimately, the largest impacts we can have as individuals when making individual choices are to equip ourselves with the information that allows us to make relative choices, if that makes sense. Understanding what makes something more or less carbon impactful, rather than getting bogged down in the specificity of numbers, especially for small organizations, smaller events, or individuals. What can we do to remove the choice paralysis and also move us towards sustainable decision making? And just as a further note to this whole thought, I just really don't want to really call out and appreciate Theater SKAM in this whole endeavor and acknowledge the amount of buy-in and resourcing that has been present from Theater SKAM. I'm actually currently sitting in front of, this is the in-office waste management station. You can just see a little bit, and filled with a whole corkboard of resources. And to say that once you start doing this work, it does start to permeate the culture of your organization. And it's hard to turn back when you see how much better you can do at your waste management and at the sustainable consideration. Yeah, thanks for the question.
Awesome. And Sadie, something I'm really taking from what you're saying too is like kind of that permission to almost sort of like gamify things too, and take enjoyment and pleasure in going, oh, that's a cool challenge. Like, oh, okay, how can we get that? Okay, I'm going to bike there. And I think because I've just been so immersed in this Project Childish for the last 5 weeks with rehearsals, that's really a headspace I've been into, where, you know, learn that as a learning from kids of like, that it's actually okay to, you know, to find it joyful to work together on this stuff. Like, rather than, sometimes I feel like, oh, it's such like, it is so urgent and it's so intense. And so I feel like I sort of need to bring a gravity or seriousness to everything, when sometimes, like, you know, a lot of aspects of this creation can be very joyful. And for me personally, and this segues into your question, Brad, like, you know, for me personally, getting to collaborate with incredibly brilliant folks is very joyful and nourishing. And for me, you know, most of my projects have some form of kind of unusual collaboration or partnering of organizations, because I enjoy what happens when we bring together really different people and approaches and minds and hearts and knowledges. And so for how we found the international partners, it was kind of the same way, you know, that I find national partners as well, which is a process of kind of asking, you know, an expansion of networks, asking folks, okay, who do you know in Halifax? Who do you know in, you know, X, Y, or Z country? Or who do you know doing blah? So, you know, reaching out through my own networks. And then also I worked with Danny Fecco from Fascinator Management, she's based in Vancouver. With so it's a little different than what she's a touring agent, but she, you know, knows a lot of companies all around the world and has a lot of connections. And I described the project to her and said, who do you think would be good to approach? And so she helped broker a couple of the partnerships, and then the partners themselves. So for example, when we brought QTP on board in India, Mumbai were one of our early partners, and they were like, oh, you know, we work closely with a company in Mauritius as well. And so then they brokered the partnership with Mauritius. So it just sort of happened. And it goes back to Laura, your question too, just that kind of small, like one step by one step, like, you know, this step got us to this step, got us to this step. And that's how we ended up with, you know, this collection of partners.
Thank you. That's wonderful. I could listen to this conversation for a while. Brad, that actually was a question that I had for Sunny as well. Well, how did the partnerships begin? Now I want to actually put that same question to Sadie, and I know Logan is here, but don't feel any pressure to speak up. But I wanted to know how that partnership started between Theater SKAM and the Sustainable Fox, and also how has it evolved over the last 5 years? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I super appreciate that question, and I'm happy to have Logan jump in a moment if he's keen. So it really did start, you saw the picture of Kate Wallace in the presentation. I hail from the theater world. I worked professionally as a stage manager for several years, but was trained in performance. And I was just becoming really conscious of the environmental crisis. I was becoming tired of the waste management that was available in green rooms, and I felt that I needed to take a step back from theater as I was working in it to try to make a larger shift in the way we tackle some other things. Maybe someday I'll come back to a full-time stage managing. We'll see. I was performing in grown-ups performed plays, kids wrote, and the compensation was a pizza party. And during cleanup, I went to go thank the head of Theater SKAM. It was a show happening that Theater SKAM was putting on. I went to go thank them, and instead of doing the good networking thing, I went, is there a compost here? As all of the pizza boxes were getting put into black garbage bags, and the answer was no. And I offered to bring it home and just shared the initial baby concept for the Sustainable Fox. And that was really the first I was having these ideas. And so Theater SKAM really was my inaugural client partnership, and they sort of said, you know, we believe in this. We want to take a chance on what you're doing. And it went really well the first year, even though neither party really knew what we were doing. And so it has really progressed over the years and has become what I think is an integral part of the SKAMpede festival and part of what people expect when they attend. In terms of how the larger dynamic has changed over the last few years, as I said, Theater SKAM, just doing this at the SKAMpede festival was no longer quite enough, right? When you become aware that you don't need to be putting these kinds of things in the garbage, all of a sudden you want the infrastructure to exist in your workplace as well. And so I've worked quite closely with Theater SKAM over the last couple of years to figure out what do these infrastructures look like on a more permanent basis in your office space? What is the infrastructure that's needed? What are the resourcing supports? So we built out the position of sustainability ambassador is what we call it. And it's a small part-time position that allows, again, for that voice to be present in SKAM's considerations year round, not just during festival prep. And yeah, so I think that's how it's developed, and we've moved much closer to something looking like a partnership, and we work kind of interchangeably on several different projects in a really kind of symbiotic feeling way, is what I would say. And I hope Logan agrees.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's a lot of things just falling into place at the right time. I was at Grown Ups Plays, whatever, I forget what it's called. I was like, oh, who's this person taking all these pizza boxes away? And Kate, who was operations manager at the time, was going through like her own kind of sustainability, less waste, bulk food, etc., buying at the time. And it also kind of like we had a major festival shift that year with some traditional location partners disappearing and things like that. And so for starting, things kind of just fell in place. And then I do really credit the pandemic a lot for kind of the way that relationship has built, both in that, you know, all of a sudden there's just more money for us anyways, as a grant reliant predominant organization, but also with the festival, you know, we were able to keep going throughout the pandemic because we were outdoors and distanced already, but it also introduced an additional stream of waste in, you know, in sanitizing everything and wearing masks and staying 10 feet apart outside in July in 2020. And then so that really kind of gave us an opportunity to have a stronger need to build that integration.
Wonderful. It's so great to hear companies actively working towards reducing waste. It's really wonderful. It's really inspiring. Thank you all. We are on the hour, and everyone has very full agendas, I'm sure. So I will take this moment to congratulate you, Sunny, and your production, and Sadie, you as well, Logan, Theater SKAM. Your wonderful partnership and the inspiring presentations you had today. Thank you to all the attendees, and have a wonderful rest of your day.